Yeah, right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. They open up church here now, so we have to register in advance, and then rather than go every week, we can go like sometimes. Like they may let 40 people in, and then 10 of the staff at the church are in there. So they basically go in every 2 weeks or so, and they're running extra stuff, and then they're YouTube in church. So I've been watching on YouTube. Yeah. Hi. What's up? Hi. How's it going? How are you doing? Hi. How's it going? Good. Yeah. It was very fun. It was good. It was super small. We had 20 people there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because of Corona. We were going to have like 100 people. And then I, almost 1 month ago, it was at our church. Yeah. It was unusual, but it was good. And then we had some people at our house after um, for like a barbecue outside. So it was okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Compass Publishing.
Hi everybody, welcome to our seminar today, and welcome to everyone around the world who's watching. Today we have a different kind of format. We're going to be joined by another speaker, and we're going to be talking about a topic that's very relevant for these days. So the reason I chose this topic was because we actually have a lot of books, a lot of products that have 21st century skills projects in them. So the students work together to do the project, and they're practicing their 21st century skills. But now with the coronavirus situation, it's become kind of more difficult to get students to work together. And I wanted to talk with my colleague James Hall, who's our EduTech program manager, about how we can adapt those projects to this new environment. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce James Hall. James, are you there? Hi, James.
Hi. Hey, John. How's it going?
I'm good.
Are you staying well in these strange times?
Yes. We're all adapting.
Awesome.
So James is coming to us from Canada, from Vancouver, Canada.
Yes. Hey, guys. How's it going? Good to be with everyone here around the world. Today with Compass here, talking about project-based learning and 21st century skills. So we hope you enjoy the session today. And if you have any questions, please jot them down, because we're going to be having some Q&A time at the end of the session.
And we prepared a few questions ahead of time to talk about. So we'll just be kind of running through those questions. There's about 10 questions, and we figure the seminar is going to take about roughly 35 minutes. So we'll have lots of time for questions afterwards. So the first question is, what are 21st century skills and why are they important? What would you say?
Exactly. Well, for me, John, I think there was a very interesting report that had come out in 2015 by the World Economic Forum. And at that time, they were talking about 21st century skills, and they were dividing it into 3 different areas. And here we are 5 years later, looking at the reality of those things becoming true. So what the World Economic Forum had mentioned was that 21st century skills are going to be divided into 3 different areas. The first area is foundational literacies. So these are content areas, right? This is similar to what we have in ELT with CLIL. So it was new content areas that are important for students to learn. The World Economic Forum specifically mentioned 6 of those. They were literacy, numeracy, scientific literacy, ICT literacy, financial literacy, and cultural and civic literacy. And this report was published 5 years ago, but if we look at the aspect of these points today, they're more true than ever. I think in addition to that, what a lot of people think about when they're talking about 21st century skills, and often publishers simplify that to just talk about the 4 C's. I think many of us educators have heard about the 4 C's before. Spoiler alert, they all begin with C. Critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration. And I think, especially in these challenging times, items like creativity, we can see the value of that very clearly.
For sure.
Here in Vancouver, for example, so many businesses are closed at this moment, and they've had to find creative ways to maintain their businesses. So we've had companies, restaurants shifting from people coming to dine in. Now it's all takeout orders or delivery orders, and then other businesses have spawned from that,
Right.
such as like
Creativity.
Uber Eats or DoorDash. Yeah.
It's all about problem solving, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you have that kind of creative solutions and critical thinking applied very much during this pandemic. Um, Communication, even more so. Here we are communicating with people around the world on YouTube. You and I, we're in completely different time zones. I think we might be in different days at the moment. It's still the 25th here, and you're coming to me from the future, which is which is always interesting. And then collaboration. So many teams are working remotely now. So many of us educators are teaching remotely, and uh, how do we communicate and collaborate with our colleagues, collaborate with our students remotely? So those four C's, they're new competency areas that we have to improve on in 21st century learning. And then the other aspects are more soft skills. And one thing that's happened in education is a shift of focus from some hard skills to soft skills. So these are like character qualities, cultivating students' curiosity, their ability to show initiative, encouraging them to show initiative, grit, perseverance when things are going difficult, being able to adapt, showing leadership, and also social and cultural awareness is another skill,
Right.
another character quality. And um, I I can definitely see here in North America how impactful young people have been in showing their social and cultural awareness these days with some of the atrocities that have happened in the U.S. recently, some of the sad things there, and then the reaction of that with the Black Lives Matters movement. You know, kids these days, they're so intelligent. They're showing a really powerful social and cultural awareness that uh, is great to see. So, um, for me, those are the areas of 21st century skills which we are seeing cultivated and which we want to see more cultivated. Really into those three areas: the foundational literacies, the new competencies, and then the learner's character qualities.
So, do you think the language classroom is is sort of a ideal place, or it's well set up to practice and foster those skills, those 21st century skills?
Yes, yes, and no. So, in some regard, it's the perfect situation because when we're learning language, we're also learning culture. And so I think that ideally, the language learning classroom is and can be an amazing place to also learn those skills. Um,
And we do a lot of
Now,
activities that involve, communication and working together with classmates and working on projects together. So those four C skills, I mean, in my experience, that's sort of what the ELT community has really latched onto is the four C's. That's why we see it in a lot of products.
that's right. So with those four C's, absolutely. And then I think with the content areas, it really depends, and the social and emotional learning, it really depends on what the publisher is doing.
Hmm.
So, one thing I've always been impressed with at Compass Publishing is the Compass's ability to show uh, different subject areas through ELT and to have a very suitable books for students showing the cultural impact in other areas as well. So um, I think the with the correct textbooks, like choosing a book from Compass is a great solution because they do well what a lot of the other huge publishing companies don't do well because they tend to be very ethnocentric or they only focus on teaching like the British culture or the
Hmm.
American cowboy culture, right? So those aspects are not really the perfect ways to do it, but I think using some of the books from Compass, such as New Frontiers or Blueprint, those are really amazing books for 21st century learning.
Yeah, for sure. So the other aspect of this is PBL. So what do we mean when we say PBL?
Right. So PBL stands for project-based learning. And project-based learning, you can probably surmise, is when students are doing learning that's integrated with a project. You typically have two types of project-based learning, and the key point is where the learning occurs. So in traditional project-based learning, the student is acquiring the learning in the process of doing the project. And you can also use project-based learning in a way that has been done in some of the products, textbooks from Compass, where the project is done as a review to further solidify the students' language learning as well.
Okay, so they in Compass's version of project-based learning, they have done some language learning, and then the project is a way to kind of practice those skills and solidify or consolidate those skills, those
Right.
language points. So
So the
how,
project will puts everything together for the student.
right.
They first, they have some scaffolding at the start where they've learned some of the words because it's a foreign language, right? So they need to acquire some of the language focused learning aspect first. And then the project is what brings it all together, reinforces the learning.
So those projects, like we have products like New Frontiers and Reading Future and Blueprint. They have those kinds of projects in them. How do those projects get students to practice their 21st century skills?
Mhm. Well, I would say through the new competency aspects of that. So the projects are the perfect time, depending on the particular project, for students to communicate with each other, for them to collaborate with each other, as well as sometimes doing something creatively or using their critical thinking or higher order thinking skills at the younger levels.
And one thing I like that we do at Compass is we sort of highlight the particular skill that the students are working on. So if teachers want to give some instruction about how to be creative, some different techniques for being creative, or some different communication techniques, they can kind of focus on some instructional point related to that skill, and then those projects are perfectly set up to practice those skills. So I
Absolutely.
like the fact that we label our projects.
Absolutely, and that makes it very clear for the teacher as well, about some of the learning outcomes that they want the students to have in the project. So it can sometimes be a little bit tricky if you're just looking at content to know, okay, this project is aimed at doing developing creativity skills, or this project is a collaboration skills. So
You don't have
uh,
to
you
guess.
know, yeah, a little guiding help for the teacher and for the students is always welcome.
So in those kinds of projects, what makes a good 21st century skills project? What differentiates a good one from a bad one, for example?
Hmm. Well, I think first, if we're going to go back to those three areas I mentioned before, the first is the content areas, right? The new literacies. So you want the topic to be something that's relatable to students today. I saw a pretty funny meme the other day which said, we're teaching 21st century students with teachers from the 20th century with content from the 19th century
Right,
with techniques from the 18th century,
right.
which is pretty true.
That's funny.
And so, I put on my, maybe it's a little bit nerdy, but I put on my teacher had a little chuckle at that. And it is quite poignant because it's true as well, right? And I think having the content areas being relevant to students. Now, that can be teaching not about the Wright brothers, but teaching about drones, for example,
Yeah, it has to
right?
be
So
relevant to them, right? To their
it has to be
lives.
relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of
Um,
relevant content or interesting content, that's one of the main characteristics.
right. So I think that Reading Future series of 21st century reading comprehension books, this is really perfect uh, reading course for students in today's century because we're not teaching them about things that happened in the distant past.
Right? It's very
They're
kind of future
things that are
oriented,
relevant.
right? It's very future
Absolutely.
oriented.
Yeah. And I think the second thing that we want to have is just, we've mentioned a few times is making sure that some of the competencies and the learning outcomes of doing the project also include those 4 C's.
Hmm.
And I suppose in the process of including those 4 C's that they are learning some of those soft skills as well. So as they're collaborating with their classmates, they're learning how to be empathetic and understanding of the classmates' point of view, for example.
I think also the level of challenge is important too. Like that's one thing I like about our Reading Future series is that even at the very low level, we have 21st century skills projects, but they're very easy. They're very simple and straightforward and easy for the students to understand. They're not giving them too much of a challenge. And at the higher levels, we have some that are much more engaging, intellectually engaging, right? So
Right,
the right level of challenge is important.
right. So, at their lower levels, it could be that students, even in their first language, haven't built enough critical thinking skills yet.
Yeah,
So,
right.
what we can do instead is building higher order thinking skills, which are, a foundational step to eventually build up critical thinking skills.
I think it's also important for 21st century skills projects to have, a period after the project where the students can reflect on what they've done. Like usually there's a like presentation step. So after the project's finished, then they've come up with they've worked with their team and they've made the product or they've answered the question or solved the problem. Then you have the presentation period. And then I think it's also important to have this kind of follow-up period where the teacher can kind of give feedback on the students, you know, their presentation as well.
Mhm. Well, I think that's a great idea for teachers to use in the classroom, that kind of period following the project where students can share and they can care about their classmates' projects. It can be a time when students are doing presentations, not for the reason of evaluating how well they do it,
No, no, no.
but
It's like
for,
learning
for
opportunity.
yeah, for really celebrating their learning,
Yeah.
right? So as a teacher, like I used to do that in my classes as well. And I always felt like the time where students are sharing what they've done is a really important time to celebrate what they've done as well, to celebrate what they've accomplished, and for them to share with their classmates what they've learned, and for their classmates to care about what their students have put forth. So I think doing that in a soft way, following the project is really great thing to do.
That sort of brings up the next question, which was, what's the teacher's role? So these projects are meant to sort of engage the students. They have something to do, some problem to solve, or some inquiry to do with their classmates. But what's the teacher supposed to be doing while this is happening, or what are they supposed to do to set up the project? What are they supposed to do during the project, and what are they supposed to do after the project?
hmm So I guess the foundational thing here is, how do we consider the teacher? Is the teacher the old-fashioned sage on the stage, or is the teacher the guide on the side? I think that in both 21st century learning and also project-based learning, the teacher's role is more like the guide on the side. So their role is as a facilitator of the learning
Hmm.
and helping to support students in that. Specifically in this case, I think the teacher probably plays two functions. The first function is explaining and modeling the project so that the expectations are clear. It could also be going over some of the specific language that students are going to be using in the project. And then the third, and maybe the most important aspect, is the teacher needs to get out of the way
Hmm.
and let the students get on with the learning. So once they've shared some of the expectations and they've built up some of the scaffolding for the students to be able to meet those expectations, the teacher really needs to get out of the way, and the project needs to be more of a student-led time, a student-led period for the learning.
That's
Now
something
that
that
may be
that's something that a lot of teachers have trouble with, right? They're so used to being the one that's the focus of the classroom, and then when they have that sort of student-centered time in class, they want to be involved as well. It's very difficult for some teachers to take that different role.
yes,
One thing also that I wanted to add to your point there was, I think another role of the teacher is to kind of generate interest in the project as well. Like it's a sort of emotional point. I think, like if you are excited or interested in the project, then that sort of carries over to the students, and they get interested and excited about it as well.
absolutely. That's very important, John. And even sometimes the teacher might not really be excited about it, but they have to
Pretend,
show
yeah,
like
right.
they're excited about it. As teachers, we also tend to sometimes be entertainers. So, if you show a lot of interest and emphasis, especially for your younger learners, I would say for learners under like fourth or fifth grade, this works very, very well with them to show some surprise. You pick something up, you're like, oh, wow, what's this? I don't know what it is. And, you know,
Right.
you uh, even though you obviously know what the item is that you're talking about, you show
They don't know
uh,
that.
curiosity,
Right,
and
right.
and then that translates very well with your students as well. I think as well, when the teacher shifts from the teacher-led part of the lesson to the student-led part of the project, it's really helpful if the teacher can circulate between the students. So that obviously works better in a more traditional classroom. You can do that in today's online learning environments in something like Zoom, where you put students into breakout groups, and then the teacher can actually show up in those
Mm,
breakout groups and give some feedback and listen in. And I find as the teacher, going around and eavesdropping on what the students are doing serves two good, two or maybe three good functions. So just moving around the classroom, not asking students to answer questions, going in and listening into them and saying, okay, oh yeah, you're on the right track there. That's a good point that you shared, or oh, you're doing this very well. To give them some gentle reinforcing, it
yeah.
keeps them on project.
Positive
And as
reinforcement.
well, yeah, positive reinforcement
Uh,
it keeps their interest up. And then you also make sure that they're using some of the target language that you've taught them prior to moving on to the project.
how about, after the project's finished? What's the role? So after you've kind of generated interest, you've got them on track, you've given them some scaffolding, you've kind of circulated while the project's happening, and given them a little bit of guidance and positive feedback. How about
Yeah.
afterwards? What's the role of the teacher there?
I think it's encouraging them to share what they've done. It's not to evaluate what they've done, but I mean, maybe quietly you can evaluate and see where you can help the students to improve on next time. But vocally in the classroom, it's about celebrating what they've done and encouraging them to share that with their classmates, because that's going to help to build up the students' confidence and to help them to acquire a love of learning, to encourage their curiosity as well. So I think that when the teacher, when the project's been completed, having the sharing time, as you mentioned, with the presentation, even putting them up on the wall in the classroom, or putting two groups together and having one group present to the other group can be beneficial.
Mm. Are there any keys to running a successful project? Like how can the teacher help the project run more smoothly?
Yes, I think similar with what I mentioned before, it really comes down to some of the scaffolding of the project. So when students should understand the basic steps and procedures they're going to take in the project, they
Maybe
should
the
also
teacher can kind of break
roughly,
it down too, right? Like set up the steps. And I don't know, one thing I've seen some teachers do is actually write the steps on the board and give them a time limit, right? So step
right,
one, we're going to do some brainstorming, and you should take 5 minutes for brainstorming. And step two, we're going to do choose the best option, and it's going to be 5 minutes or something like that. So you have steps, and then the time frame as well.
exactly. So you want to have them to understand like what they're going to do at each step. Having time frame is a good idea with that. So especially a lot of the time, our classes and interactions with the students do come under a time limit. So we want to make sure that they're working progressively towards the outcome. And I also find, John, that appointing or having the students to select uh, roles within the project can be beneficial as
Hmm.
well. So of course, it depends on what kind of project they're doing. But if we have a project where someone has to present, you may ask that two of your friends, let's call them Lucas and Tom, are the people that are going to present. If we have someone that has to record, we may want to appoint Geo and Victor as the people to record.
So somebody could take notes. Somebody could be like the person who's the chairperson, the person who's sort of managing the conversation or the brainstorming, and maybe somebody could be the presenter. So you could have different roles, right? Yeah, I find
That's right.
a lot of students, they just once the teacher says, okay, go on with the project, a lot of times they just don't know what each of them is supposed to do. That's one of the reasons that the project doesn't sort of get rolling. But yeah, I guess that if you assign those roles as a teacher, then you make it clear what they're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, and I think you can do a mix of assigning yourself as, and then you also want to have a mix of where the students select the role for themselves. Of course, we all kind of gravitate to things that we like to do and that we're good at. But sometimes we, want to also encourage ourselves and encourage other people around us to go out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's how we
yeah,
grow, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, someone that's a bit more shy, maybe they can do the presentation at some times. And of course, keeping in mind that when that person gives that presentation, we're going to be applauding them and encouraging them to
Right.
do well.
I think giving roles also that helps to make sure that the workload is balanced. One of the things that my daughter is always complaining about when she does projects in university is the work is not evenly balanced, right? Somebody does all the work, and then some people they're just coasting. They have a free ride. So you can help as a teacher by assigning roles, and each person has their own thing to do in the project.
Yeah, that's helpful for sure. I think we've all had that experience when we were students, and we definitely want to make sure that the expectations for each role are clear and that each person has a well-defined role within the project.
So one of the big issues that I wanted to talk about in this seminar was also, you know, maybe some of our audience, they're familiar with projects, they've run projects in their classrooms, but now we face this kind of new situation where we have to do remote teaching or online teaching, and it just puts project-based learning in a totally different framework, right? We have to adjust things. So, first of all, how are things in the schools in Canada right now? What is the situation?
It has changed a lot, John. I'll tell you that. The 3 months ago, it was normal, and then all the schools closed. They were all shifted to go remote extremely quickly, and of course, a lot of the textbooks that they were using didn't have an easy online solution to use, so they were definitely scrambling. A lot of teachers were teaching the entire day on Zoom, and then they would be exhausted by the end of that because talking for 8 hours, even if you're a person that loves to talk like me, talking straight for 8 hours is impossible.
Right.
And so it eventually evolved in some regard. What we've had is that teachers were teaching for about 1 hour a day with an online lesson, and then students are doing some independent study or study in small groups or study with their parents at home, and various like projects, learning materials related to their curriculum as well. Universities and schools here are still closed. A few schools opened back up as an optional point for students to go in, and they would be going in once or twice a week. So it was more with, I suppose, like it's been a very, very new term in learning, but it's a hybrid learning. And in hybrid learning, part of the time is teacher-led, and then a lot of the time the students are learning independently.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're kind of
So
combining self-study and kind of content. They're digesting content themselves, and then the teacher is doing some like online, like real-time work with them as well. But the teacher can't do that all the time. It would be exhausting, right?
you couldn't do it all the
Yeah.
time, right? And I think that's what a lot of teachers have found. That's what a lot of academic coordinators and directors and school boards have found. So, what I think we're going to see moving forward, because this current situation, as much as we would all like it to go away, the reality is that we really do have to continue to be cautious for the foreseeable future. And so I think that the hybrid model is really what we're going to see in the classrooms over the next year to 2 years. And that's part of the EdTech transformation as well. Compass Publishing, of course, is one of the companies at the foreground of that, with solutions such as ClassBox for teachers, one of the projects I've been working on, and as well Big Box for learners, where students can do curated, adaptive learning projects on Big Box. They can do blended learnings, practice activities that connects into the student's LMS with their teacher. So it doesn't all have to be teacher-led. We're going to see a lot of student-led learning moving forward.
Well, Evelise Rabassa, one of our audience here, she says she kind of predicted our next question, which is how can we apply the foundations of PBL in a remote environment? Are there any adaptations you would suggest, taking into account the moment we're going through?
Right. So I think that the part of the lesson that is teacher-led should be the time when the teacher is on a broadcasting platform. So if they're using Microsoft Teams, or if they're using Moodle or Zoom or another way to broadcast their lesson. I think part of their broadcast should be the language-focused learning aspect of that project, and also some of the instructions for the project.
So that's where
And
that's where they kind of set up the project, right? They set up the language and set up the project with the online, like real time video communication.
that's right, yeah. And then I think depending on the scope of the project, you might want to have, like you wouldn't want to be broadcasting the entire time. So you would get off the broadcast and you'd move on to another kind of collaborative area where students could work. Now they may be calling each other and working on the project, or they may be doing part of their, if it's a collaborative project, they may be doing parts of it together. Um, if you were broadcasting the whole time, you could put them in breakout rooms on Zoom, for
Yeah.
example. However, I'm not sure that would really be enough time to complete some of the projects.
I think
Using some,
I
oh,
think
sorry, John.
you were going to say exactly what I was thinking, which is the another tool that's very useful is something like Google Docs, right, where there's
Yeah,
just some kind of environment where they can collaborate on a project together. That could be
yeah,
a slide presentation, or it could be a document, or even a spreadsheet or a drawing.
exactly. So yeah, using some Google Docs or Google presentation file, perfect way where they can all collaborate and edit and change the document in real time. I think so platforms like Slack, even though we typically use that more in the office, a lot of people are using Slack for education now,
Hmm.
and that could be something that teachers check out to use with some of the Compass materials, where students can get on Slack together and can collaborate and work on projects.
Then maybe for the presentation phase, like the wrap up phase for the project, you can get back to the video conferencing software. So you can give students an opportunity to present their work, right? They just have to do screen sharing. I think for older,
Absolutely.
middle school, or even upper elementary, they can handle that kind of technological challenge.
They're better than me.
They're pretty bright.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that when you connect back up with them in a classroom environment, or sorry, within like an online classroom environment, that's the time that they can share some of their learning outcomes as well.
So yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's during this difficult time, it's a lot of trial and error. We don't have all the answers, but hopefully James and I gave you some ideas that you can try out in your classroom. And did you have any final closing words, James?
Uh, I'd just like to encourage everyone to check out some of the items we mentioned in today's session. They will definitely give you a lot of help for teaching. And it will give your students a lot of help for learning. So please have a look at ClassBox for teachers. It's classboxenglish.com. You can sign up and get a free access to that if
You
you're
can you
using
can see
products.
the website right here.
Exactly. And if you're using Compass products, you're going to be able to get access for that as a teacher. It'll help you easily get access to all your textbooks and materials. Now, if you've got students, you want to make sure that they get a big box subscription as well. So with big box, students will be able to learn independently, to complete different projects in the class booster section. They can subscribe to an online library. There's really a lot of materials that they can use there. So what we'd like to do as a company here at Compass Publishing is to help you as teachers and to help our learners to make the most of this difficult situation. And we hope to continue to bring you guys resources that you can use to get through this. And we'll be there with you wherever you're learning or wherever you're teaching.
Great. Thanks very much, James, for your time.
That's my pleasure, John. It's good to be here with you today. Look forward to seeing you again in person sometime soon.
For sure. Anyways, I hope everybody enjoyed our presentation today, and we look forward to seeing you again in a future seminar. Thanks very much.
Yo te traigo esta bomba puertorriqueña. Yo te la traigo de Cupey, de Vega Baja y de Santurce, de todas partes de Puerto Rico.